Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the latest in our Freeths Presents Hospitality Meets Sustainability webinar. Today's session is going to be on greenwashing. My name is Iona Silverman. I'm a partner in the IP team here at Freeths. I'm in the IP team, but we advise a lot in the IP team on advertising and marketing, regulatory, and that, of course, includes greenwashing, which is a huge topic for a lot of our clients at the moment. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here today to speak to you all on the topic of greenwashing, but in the context of hospitality. This is being recorded and we will share a recording afterwards. If you have got any questions, please do drop them into, Tom's going to tell me if I get this wrong, into the Q&A. Is that right, Tom? Or is it the chat function?
It's the Q&A.
It's the Q&A. Drop it into the Q&A. Really happy to answer your questions. If we don't get time to address them today, I'm really happy to pick them up with you separately. I'm conscious that we've only got half an hour of time, so I will try to rattle through things. So as I said, this is the third in our Hospitality Meets Sustainability series. The first one was an introductory session. We then had a session on waste reforms affecting the hospitality sector. If you missed either of those and would like to catch them, there are recordings available. And the fourth and final session will be on green energy procurement on the 4th of September. So if you haven't signed up for that, please do. We will share a link. Also a quick plug for our Sustainability Horizon Scanner. This was our inaugural Horizon Scanner specifically for the sustainability issues, which went out in June 2025. So it's very recent. We update it every 6 months. It's been a huge hit with a lot of our clients. They found it really helpful. So if you haven't yet got a copy but would like one, just let us know. We will add you to the mailing list and make sure that you get a copy. So let's dive straight into it. What is greenwashing? I think we all know what greenwashing is really, but just to frame it, it is essentially a misleading environmental claim. It's where what you say about your business doesn't necessarily match what you do. And that discrepancy is being picked up by regulators all over the world who have all got different powers. But so we're going to stick to what's happening in the UK at the moment, but I will touch a little bit on the EU and the US as well. To mention what is a claim? Well, of course, it's your advertising and marketing copy. It's what goes out on any products that you sell, but it's also any website copy, any information in annual reports or sustainability reports, and it's also statements or imagery. I think people sometimes think that greenwashing is limited to, say, a very specific statement, but actually if you're using green imagery to kind of convey a green image, that will all play into your risk of greenwashing. So it's everything. And everything at the moment is making headlines. You know, if you are on the world's most sustainable hotels list, that's quite the coup. But the flip side of that is that if you're trying to make environmental claims about doing less laundry, washing less towels, about the green parking you may have available, if you are also simultaneously in the middle of the disposable cup crisis, how does that sit overall? And might you end up making headlines for the wrong reasons? This is a topic that really lends itself to the press and they are all over it. And I think that plays into my next slide, which says, what's the risk? You know, the real risk here, and there's quite a few different risks actually. The risk of reputational damage is huge. A lot of companies are spending a lot of time and money and effort investing in sustainability because it's the right thing to do, because it ultimately will affect your bottom line, because consumers do want to try and do the right thing and do want to invest and buy sustainable products and services. And all of that takes a lot of money and investment and effort, and getting it wrong just once, getting a negative ASA decision or being embroiled in a CMA investigation can really hit you reputationally, and it can take a long time to climb back out of that. And we will talk a bit later in this webinar about companies who have managed to reverse at least ASA decisions, if not the reputational damage associated with them. But in addition to that, obviously the ad that you're running could get banned. That is not normally a big deal for most people because the ASA is so slow that by the time they ban your ad, it's come and gone. So it's really the reputational damage attaching to it that's problematic. And I used to say, 6 months ago, I used to say, well, that's probably the worst of it. Yes, you can get some activism. Yes, your directors can be in breach of their directors' duties, and that is quite serious. And, it can impact investment, but there were no fines. But now, since the 7th of April this year, the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, has got the power to fine up to 10% of global turnover for breach of consumer law. And that can include greenwashing. Now, we haven't seen any fines yet. I anticipate that we will see some soon. The CMA has kept its investigation into the FMCG sector on greenwashing open, I think because they were waiting for the power to be able to fine, and they are probably going to finalise that now. So I really do think that we are going to see fines in this sector very soon, and they're likely to be quite substantial in order for the CMA to make its mark and to show that it's got some clout. So I think fines are something to be conscious of at the moment. So what are the rules in the UK? In the UK, you need to be looking at the CMA's Green Claims Code, which applies to all commercial practices. As I said, the CMA's investigate the FMCG sector. That sector investigation is still live, and has also investigated the retail sector in the past. It tends to go sector by sector. We don't know what it's going to look at next, but it could be energy, it could be hospitality, we don't know. They've also got the Advertising Standards Authority CAP code, which applies to all forms of advertising specifically. The ASA will investigate any complaint that it receives. So it only takes one board person in their armchair to think that you have misled them for a complaint to be made, for an investigation to take place. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But in addition to that, the ASA is now using AI to proactively search online for ads that might break the rules. And it tends to, if you follow their decisions, they tend to come in waves. So the week before last, we had a wave of decisions against ads for weight loss jabs. They'd obviously decided to have a look at that industry sector in particular that week. So we will see waves of greenwashing decisions come through on the ASA as they use that technology to crawl the internet and find infringing ads. Of course, it's not limited to the internet. A lot of the ads that get complained about are billboard ads, television ads. It's all under their remit. In the EU, we've got the proposed Green Claims Directive, and we've also got the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition Directive. And in the US, we've got the Federal Trade Commission Green Guides. Now, what I'm not going to do is go through every single rule in detail, partly because all of the rules are slightly different, but partly because they're all kind of the same. So actually, if you take a step back and look at the big picture, what you need to do is you need to be transparent and you need to be able to substantiate your claims. And if you can fulfill those two basic things, you're in quite a good place. Now, when I say transparent, I mean be truthful. Now, 99% of the organisations I come across are being truthful. They are talking about good schemes that they have in place, what they're doing, what they're really proud of. Now, most people aren't trying to mislead. However, there can be a tendency for marketing teams to get quite excited about what they perceive as a great tagline and not necessarily take a step back and think, how might that be interpreted by someone who doesn't know this business as well as I do? And so taking that step back and being objective about what you're saying is really important. Is what you're saying clear? Is it unambiguous? Is there any additional information that someone might need in order to understand that claim fully? If you're making a comparative claim, e.g. better than, kinder than, is it really clear what you're comparing against? Are you looking at the full life cycle of your products or services? I'm going to go through some case studies in a minute and we'll see just how important looking at the big picture is. And then once you've done all of that, you come to substantiation. Can you substantiate the claim you are making? And again, that seems quite straightforward, but a few points to note. Firstly, you need, as a business, to be able to substantiate that claim. Not any supplier you might have. It's not enough to say, oh, well, it said on the supplier's box, so they must be able to substantiate it. No, you need to hold that data yourself. So ask your supplier for that data. They should be able to give it to you. And also, are you substantiating the claim that you are making? Again, that sounds really obvious, but it might surprise you to hear how many times clients come to me and say, oh, yes, I've got the data to substantiate that. And I look at it and it doesn't match the claim that's being made, because that claim has slightly evolved over time as different people have looked at it and tinkered with it and reworded it, and actually doesn't quite match the data in the end. So making sure that the data you have substantiates the claim that you are making is really important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rattle through some case studies. Now, none of them are directly applicable to the hospitality sector. However, you can learn something from each of them, because in each of them, we learn a bit about how the ASA operates and what it is looking for. And also, I'd say that sort of 5 years ago, we were looking at quite unsophisticated claims, and it was quite obvious. And sometimes it still is quite obvious. For example, when airlines make claims about being sustainable, you really have to question that. But now we've got quite sophisticated players like Ocean Saver, who are genuinely trying to do the right thing by developing products that are better for the environment, or at least not worse for the environment. And so, a lot of thought goes into what they are doing, and still they come a cropper. So it shows how difficult this area is. So in this case, Ocean Saver had developed a laundry pod, which they said was fully biodegradable, was plastic free, was 100% plastic free, zero plastics. Now, the issue here was that although this product did decompose or biodegrade, it didn't do so in your laundry environment. It did so further downstream. And the ASA said, actually, we think biodegradable will be understood to mean that the pods would fully biodegrade through normal use, i.e. in your washing machine. Ocean Saver did provide substantiation as to how these products biodegrade. However, that data actually showed that the pods wouldn't fully biodegrade. It was somewhere between 38 and 84% biodegrading. And that data, although it related to the polymer in question, it didn't relate specifically to the laundry pods. So no testing had been done on the laundry pods. So it just goes to show, yes, they thought they had the data, but no, it didn't really substantiate the claim they were making. And no, it didn't relate to the products that they were dealing with. And therefore, the ASA said biodegradable film and fully biodegrade were not adequately substantiated claims. So it goes to show, these brands that seem like they're doing the right thing can also get it wrong. And so you do need to be quite careful if you are putting something out there that you are claiming is biodegradable or good for the environment. And the next decision we're going to look at is kind of similar to that. So this is a case study about 2 separate coffee pod companies. Now I use Lavazza coffee pods, and I use the compostable ones. And I thought to myself quite a few years ago, I wonder how they compost. I wonder how this works. So I did this experiment with my kids where we filled a big glass jar with compost, and then we put various things in it. So we put like a tea bag in it, we put an apple core, a flower, a lollipop stick, and we put one of these eco compostable coffee pods in it, and we taped it up and we left it for absolutely ages, and we came back to it, and it might not surprise you to hear that the apple core had gone. I think there was a bit of vegetable peel in there that went quite quickly. The flour disappeared. The tea bag mostly disappeared. Remained untouched with a lollipop stick and the eco compostable coffee pod. So I knew that I couldn't compost them in my home compost, but it took an experiment for me to find that out. And most people probably aren't going to do that. And you know what? I still put it in my food waste bin, because my food waste bin goes to an industrial composter, and I assume it can be composted there, but I don't know. So when this case came out, I was actually quite pleased for the clarification. So Lavazza say that they have these compostable coffee capsules, and similarly, Dualit coffee bags claim that they are compostable coffee bags. And the ASA found against both of them because, again, they said compostable would be understood to mean that the capsules or bags could be composted at home. And although both products were certified to a standard designed to break down, that was to break down within an industrial compost. And they would not necessarily break down within your domestic compost. Now, had they said on their product packaging, put this in your industrial compost, put this in your food waste bin, their claims would not have been misleading. And actually, Dualit did say that on their website, but their advert linked through to a page on their website about those Dualit coffee bags, but it didn't on that page tell you how to dispose of them. You had to navigate to another page, and that was just too far away. So the key here is if something is certified to a certain standard, just make that really clear. Tell people this is how you dispose of something, this is where you dispose of it. And it's very difficult in this country because all recycling is different by county, and so it's quite difficult to communicate to consumers how they should dispose of something. But the broader point is, whatever your claim, give more information. If it's a website or it's a social media claim, if you can click through to a website which gives you more information, which tells you those things, you're reducing your risk of greenwashing. If you can put things in small print that is visible enough, or you can explain it, then you are reducing your risk of greenwashing. So we move on now to the energy sector. So I'm really sorry for the amount of words on this slide. You don't need to read them all. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we had two energy cases recently. One was for Shell and one was for Total Energies. Now, Shell had got stung quite a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when it had an ad for solar power, and it was a couple of billboards, one in Bristol, one in London, and they showed some wind farms, I think, and solar power, and they said to consumers, we're investing in the future. We've got all of these wind farms and solar panels, and everything that they said was true, and they could substantiate it. But the ASA said it is not clear to consumers that in fact a large majority of your business is still based on fossil fuels, and therefore people are going to see these ads and think, oh, Shell's gone green, fab, when in fact Shell has not gone green. Shell is on the way to becoming greener, but is still significantly investing in fossil fuels. That is not clear to people, and therefore you are greenwashing. So I thought that was interesting at the time. Their most recent ad said all of the things that are on this screen, but to highlight in particular, it said, in 2023, 68% of Shell's global investments included oil and gas, 23% included low carbon energy solutions, and 9% non-energy products. And because they were very clear about that in this advert, despite receiving 75 complaints, that advert was not banned and was not found to be misleading. However, Total Energies had a paid for post on X talking about the optimal way to build a wind or solar farm, getting the stamp of Total Energies for this new way of thinking, the roads to carbon neutral, a special presentation by, and then saying pioneers for the next 100 years. Now, they received a total of 1 complaint. However, their ad was found to be misleading, and that was because it omitted material information about the overall environmental impact. So again, it's the ASA saying, just give people more information. If you are doing something great, if you are building a hotel that is going to be more environmentally friendly than your others for whatever reason, great, shout about that, tell everyone about it. But tell them what proportion of your business that is, and maybe what you're doing next. Yes, we're proud of this hotel. Yes, the next hotel we're going to build is going to be on the same footprint and maybe also improved. We still have, however many other hotels in our business that we are transitioning towards using more green energy or doing whatever it is. So you're being really clear about what you're doing and what improvements you're seeking to make. And I don't think anyone expects any business to be perfect. And I actually think consumers really value having more information rather than less. I think they feel trusted to say, okay, I understand this business and I understand that it is improving and this is what it's doing, rather than, oh, yes, it's completely green, which is unrealistic in any sector, I would say. Final case study, really recent one. I think this came out last week. This was Aramco powered by How. So Aramco sponsored these McLaren cars, and they put out lots of copy saying, you know, discover how we're researching ultra efficient hybrid internal combustion engines and advanced fuels. Discover our work in ultra efficient hybrid internal combustion engines and advanced fuels, and how can we pioneer the fuel that could lower emissions? How can we help with the global net zero targets? So the ASA said in this case that the claims were focused, it was clear that the claims were focused on improving the performance of the road cars or the F1 car. So although there was an environmental element, and they did mention that, the context of the ad meant that the environmental targets were incidental. And actually it was clear that a lot of the big language about improvement went to performance of the cars, the fuel, impacting the performance rather than the fuel's impact on the environment. And therefore the ads did not misrepresent Aramco's environmental impact. So a rare decision in which the ASA actually finds it's not greenwashing. So I think that's interesting because it goes to show that you can have an environmental element to an ad, as long as, if you're using quite punchy language, it's clear that that language relates to performance of a different element, doesn't relate to the environmental element. I'd say it's a fairly high risk strategy because the ASA is not always predictable, but it does go to show that they are cognizant that actually, you know, you have a full and rounded business and you might want to make quite bold claims about another element of your business, and you might want to weave in a small environmental theme, and that could be okay. So a quick look at what's going on in the rest of Europe. In Germany, the Public Prosecutor's Office in Frankfurt has imposed a 25 million euro fine on DWS after accusing the company of greenwashing. So you're seeing some very big fines going on in Germany. And also last year, the Federal Court of Justice outlawed the unsubstantiated use of the term climate neutral in advertising. Now we're seeing that in this country too. You know, climate neutral, carbon neutral, sustainable. You need to be really, really careful when you're using those terms. I'd say it's very hard to substantiate the word sustainable, because unless what you have created is genuinely sustainable, i.e. can be sustained without input, external input, then fine. But that's not what most people mean. I think you need to use much more specific terms in your copy. Climate neutral. I've seen a lot of people in this country starting to use carbon positive, i.e. we now absorb more carbon than we emit. Again, if you can substantiate that and very clearly, and it relates to the entirety of your business operations, fine. But I would treat with caution because it's a very difficult term to substantiate. In Switzerland, the well-known sports brand On had a complaint filed against it for misleading advertising of its trainer subscription because it promised eco-friendly recyclable shoes. An investigation found that actually no shoes had been recycled, which led to a complaint that they were misleading consumers about their sustainability efforts. So that case hasn't gone to court yet, but what's interesting about that is you can present something as recyclable. It is on the public whether they recycle that or not. You as a business don't necessarily have much control over that. However, they've been taken to task on it irrespective. And I wonder if that's because if something is recyclable, but there are no facilities for recycling it, then that's all well and good, but it doesn't mean anything. So I wonder if what we could take from this is, if you're going to make a claim like recyclable, make sure that there is a facility for recycling that product to enable people to fulfill that claim. We'll see where it goes, but I think that's kind of where my take on it at this stage. What's happening in the US? I mean, all bets are off in the US, really. It's all going on. There's a lot of very big headlines, and a lot of them are quite concerning. A lot of big companies have done a U-turn on a number of DEI policies and environmental policies, which is not ideal. I would say that Trump is here for the short term and climate change is here for the long term. That would be my take on it. And I think that you need to do what you need to do to comply with legislation, or comply with any temporary changes, or comply with the way you need to be perceived in the States. But I'd say under the surface, most companies will still be working towards sustainability goals, because I think they will appreciate that in the longer term they are necessary. That is what I'm hearing from people on the ground. I hope that that is correct. So I thought I would finish, we've got 5 minutes left. I thought I would finish with some common pitfalls and then a checklist on how to mitigate greenwashing in practice. So common pitfalls that I see are use of green imagery, and failure to understand that that actually impacts the statement you're making. Innocent got stung a few years ago for that, because they made some claims, but the rest of their advert also implied that the claims went broader than what they were saying, that they were more general, sustainable and green claims. Failure to consider overall impact, like we've seen with Shell, for example. You can say what is entirely true, and you can substantiate it, but if you're not looking at the big picture, you can still get stung. Use of buzzwords. I mean, I've talked about, use of the word sustainable. I don't think it's very easy to substantiate that. Assumptions. Quite a few years ago, Tesco got stung because they sold a vegan burger and they said that it was better for the environment than eating meat. And yes, we all know that, red meat's not great for the environment. Probably eating vegetarian food is better for the environment. However, eating that specific vegan burger, they did not have the data to substantiate that claim. And the ASA said, well, what are the food miles and what chemicals are used in the production of it? And you need to be able to present all of those facts rather than assume that eating vegetarian food is less harmful to the environment than eating red meat. Comparative claims that don't compare. I talk to my clients all the time about this, because they always want to say better, kinder, in a non-greenwashing sense, cheaper. They always want to make comparative claims, and that's fine, but you have to be really clear what you're comparing against. Is it against your competitor? Is it against, your previous iteration of that product? What is it? Just saying we are better, we are greener is not particularly helpful and is potentially very problematic. And of course, a failure to substantiate. You need to be able to have the data to substantiate the claims that you are making. So how are you going to mitigate greenwashing in practice? You're going to stay up to date, get our horizon scanner, just keep on top of what's happening. The CMA and the ASA are always putting out updates. The ASA in particular puts out quite digestible top tips, and the CMA I would keep an eye on for sector investigations and what the conclusion of the FMCG sector investigation is. Get the topic onto your board's agenda. If it's not there, it needs to be there. You need to have backing from the top in order for your company to engage properly with this. And then agree on your business's approach to risk. Some businesses say we're going to fly by the seat of our pants, but most people I speak to are very aware of the risk of greenwashing and the potential reputational damage in particular that it could do to them, and are taking this very seriously. Train your marketing team. They're the ones that generate the copy. If they understand the risks here and they understand the bigger picture, they are going to be better able to generate that copy. A lot of companies that I speak to have put a process in place, which skips a couple of points there, but put a process in place so that high risk claims make their way to legal, perhaps put a traffic light system in. These are the claims we're comfortable making. We have the data to back them up. These are the claims we are not comfortable making. You may not make these in any circumstances. Other claims perhaps are an amber risk and need to make their way to legal to be reviewed. Going back up a couple of points, collect data to substantiate your claims. We have talked about that. Explain your claims. If you want to make a claim and you're not sure, put a website page in place, explain what you mean, explain why you've got the data to back it up. The more information you put out there, the lesser your risk of greenwashing. And finally, address any ASA ads complaints head on. I couldn't tell you the number of times my clients either bury their heads in the sand or come to us after they have had a couple of rounds of correspondence with the ASA and bring us in at that stage. And had we been brought in earlier, we might have been able to resolve that complaint unofficially and confidentially, and massively mitigated the impact that complaint could have had. So I would say get on top of them. Don't bury your head. Don't try to disregard them with a couple of, it wasn't us, it was fine. You just tackle it head on. I have got one slide on what we do in our advertising and marketing practice more generally, because I think it probably is very relevant to this industry sector in particular. So I'm sure you're very aware of the healthier foods advertising and promotions restrictions that are coming into place on the 1st of October. We're advising a lot of our clients on those. Also advising on ambush marketing, particularly over the summer when we've got a lot of sporting events. Pricing claims and alcohol promotions, influencer agreements, social media. We have a ridiculous number of marketing agencies that end up using music on social media that they didn't have the right to use, and the company that they have created that content for then gets stung with a letter. If that is you, we are very used to dealing with it and we can help. And of course, ASA complaints. So it is 11:31. I have rattled through that. I am going to see if there are any questions. I don't think there are at the moment. If you have got any questions, please do pop them in the chat. I'm really happy to stay online and answer them for a little bit. If you don't have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is on the screen if you'd like to ask me something separately. I'm really happy to have that conversation. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope that was useful to you.